Most of us have, at some time or another, gone back to visit the places of our childhood, reviving old memories. And we all come away amazed at how small everything was. Well, it all seemed bigger at the time because we were smaller. Well, that's just an example of how we take for granted the fact that all products need to be designed with due consideration for the sizes of the people using them. Because we all vary in size, not just from children to when we grow old, but also from person to person. Fat, thin, tall, short, and in just about any proportion and combination. It's part of what makes us individuals. So the designer of a product has to consider not just our height and size, but whether we're strong enough or too weak to use something, whether we're standing up or sitting down, driving, cooking, or relaxing at the end of the day. The variations and combinations are endless. So how do we deal with it all? How do designers plan for all these human variations and needs? And how, as users, do we judge if something is right for us or not? Well, in this programme, we're going to identify some of the factors involved in this complex relationship between people and products. We won't be able to find all the answers, but we should be able to get a good idea of the kinds of questions designers have to ask before they design something, and we should ask before we buy something. Let's begin by looking at us and our personal equipment, our body, its capabilities and its limitations. No, same as yesterday. Well, at least I'm not getting any shorter. You know, with all the variations in height and size, it really is amazing how similar we all are. Some of us are extremely tall and some are extremely small, but generally most people fit into a fairly narrow range, and proportionately all of us are reasonably similar. This is important because here lies the basis for designing things for people. Plan for what is similar and allow for what is different. Now, this isn't a new principle that was invented in the last 10 years. It is, in fact, a natural consequence of something that originated way back in the Stone Age. A good-looking chap, wasn't he? However, the animal skin didn't fit too well. It was probably draped and crudely fitted. Made to measure came later. But early tools had to fit the human hand and body much more comfortably. Spears had to be long, but not too long so they dragged on the ground or were too heavy to throw. Stones had to be of a size that fitted comfortably in the human hand. And those that made stone tools could be considered the first designers. So without knowing it, early man began the science of anthropometrics. The science of the measurement of the physical capabilities and limitations of the human body. Once early man realized the problems, probably after embarrassing mistakes with too heavy a stone, the first need was to measure the successful results. There were no tape measures, so man turned instead to many interesting and pretty sophisticated means of measurement. This is a barleycorn. And unlike many other fruits of nature, it was found that the mature barleycorn grew to a common size. Now, this meant that putting them end to end gave a consistent means of measurement. And believe it or not, it was used in the Middle Ages to size shoes. And it's a system that is still used in England today. We don't call them size 10 barleycorns, of course, but the division between shoe sizes is 1 barleycorn, or 1/3 of an inch. That's approximately 8 millimetres or so. Fascinating. Now, back in the days of the barleycorn, we also had measurements like ells. That's the distance from the hand to the elbow. Fists, the width of the average fist, and an inch was the width of the top joint of a man's thumb. And the yard was supposedly the distance from the tip of King John's outstretched fingers to the tip of his nose. Or was it his shoulder? Anyway, it happened to be 36 inches. Well, approximately. These standards, so to speak, were used for the measurements and design of chairs, tables, axes, brooms, whatever. You see, although some things can be custom-made, made to measure, most forms of design deal with mass production. This means that products that are meant to be used in relation to some part of our bodies have to be made in an economical range of sizes. And the variations between sizes have evolved over the years to offer a reasonable fit for almost everyone. With shoes, that's 1 or half a barleycorn. With shirts for men, it's judged normally by the circumference of the neck. So shirts are made with half-inch variations in neck size. Sizing is common in all products where the individual is significant to the function, from gloves to tennis rackets. But for a manufacturer, it may be impossible to cost-effectively produce a range of sizes to suit absolutely everyone. Instead, they try to satisfy the largest section of the population by using what statisticians call the curve of normal distribution. It's also known as the bell-shaped curve because it's shaped like the cross-section of a bell. And for the science of anthropometrics, it's used either to represent the whole population or simply one user group. Let's say, for example, it represents height. At this end, we'll find the extremely tall people, and at this end, the extremely short people. Now, the distance above the line represents the number of people at a particular height. And what we find is that the majority of people are round about average height, about 5'8" or 173 centimetres or so. And as we look for taller and smaller people, the numbers get less. Now, if we were producing a product that was related to a person's height, then it makes sense to concentrate the range of sizes we make on this middle zone. There are more people around that height, and therefore more sales. Some manufacturers may only deal within a certain zone, but more often than not, products are produced to satisfy the middle 90%. And fortunately for me, I'm about here. If I were at the extremes, I would probably have to buy things custom made. So what does this imply for good design? Well, for the designer, it's important to make appropriate use of this bell-shaped curve and to plan a range of product sizes to balance costs with fit. Fortunately, this same curve with the appropriate scales can be used with almost any human variable, even hand size. But there are many products that just wouldn't be economical to produce in a range of sizes. Let me show you one example. An electric drill. Quite a jump in technology from the Stone Age. Now, if I were to ask for a drill with a handle that would fit my hand exactly, I'd be very disappointed. In this case, it's a matter here of one size fits all, about as well as it can. And if we explore how we use an electric drill, you'll see what I mean. The electric drill is one of the many products that only exist because there's a need for something else. Well, we need electric drills because we need fairly easily achieved, accurately dimensioned round holes. If I need a certain hole there, I mark it, I put in the correct size drill bit, I aim, locate, and drill a hole. And I've made a hole. Brilliant. Now, for the designer, the task was to produce a product that enabled me to do that with a minimum of difficulty, almost subconsciously. How is that achieved? Well, the smooth handle is one size and is placed so that the drill's centre of gravity acts close to the hand and to minimise strain on the wrist. Yet the grip has a large enough contact area so that the pressure and thus numbness in the palm and fingers could be minimised. So, variations in hand size and the many ways we use the drill are accommodated in a form that naturally orientates the hand for operating the drill. You know, it's amazing how the hand can easily change its orientation to operate all manner of tools, from a saw to a screwdriver, and all kinds of other things. Like when we lift boulders, rake the lawn, chop wood, hammer nails, screw screws, turn on the lights, write letters, crack nuts, thread a needle, or play a piano. All these actions require the right kind of force applied with the right kind of motion, with varying degrees of required accuracy, and always with one thing in common. Just as when we drill a hole, we can perform all these actions without much conscious thought about the objects we have in our hand. Because we rely on the object's clues for use matching our expectations, and that is extremely important. Because one of the most critical characteristics of good design is that the product matches the user's expectations. If it doesn't, then it's not good design. and it results in aches and pains or sore fingers and frustration on the part of the user. It may even be dangerous. Well, here's one where perhaps the user is just plain embarrassed. These door handles should tell us how to use them. A pad is a visual message to push, but in this case, you have to pull the door open. From the other side, it looks exactly the same. Do you push or pull this time? Well, it's easy to make a wrong guess. Here are some more examples. This simple design is pretty clear. On the outside, the handle suggests pull. On the inside, a slightly higher bar indicates push, with a pad to tell you exactly where to push. This door has handles on both sides and so confuses the user. This door has bars on each side, which is also confusing. So a sign was added to tell the user what to do. However, if the door needs a sign, then the design has failed, because it should tell us how it is to be used from a short distance away. It's no good finding out after we've made a mistake. And it doesn't help when the same design performs different functions, as has happened at these two nearby stores. But you see, it's one thing to design a product merely to fit the user. It must also be designed so that it will fit the context in which it will be used. And there is no better context to demonstrate this than the one that is familiar to us all, the kitchen. Now, it is important not only to design, say, a saucepan so that it can be held in the hand. It must also be designed so that it will relate successfully to the whole act of cooking. In fact, by considering the notion of cooking, we are combining the science of anthropometrics with the science of ergonomics. Ergonomics, another long word. Roughly translated, this is the study of a person in a workplace. It is concerned with how much space we need in which to do something comfortably. In this case, cook. Kitchens are a lot like people, different from each other, yet a lot the same. We're surrounded by cupboards with counters on top, and below them, toe space. That's simply because our feet stick out at the front. A toe space enables us to get closer to the counters. The key elements in a kitchen are considered these days to be the stove, the refrigerator, and the sink. The placement of these items is often determined by what is called the working triangle. That is, a triangle drawn between these three items. The recommendation is that the total length of the triangle's sides shouldn't be more than about 6 meters or 20 feet. But what happens in a long, thin kitchen? Well, the triangle becomes flat, and we would measure the distance between the two furthest appliances and multiply it by 2. But why 6 meters or 20 feet? Well, the number is a kind of a compromise. It generally produces a kitchen where two people won't bump into each other too often, or where the doors of the appliances won't bump into each other either. It also separates the key elements to provide workspace and storage to satisfy the other activities of preparing food for cooking and washing and drying the dishes. But why not an even bigger layout? If the sides of the triangle measured 18 meters or 60 feet, there would be plenty of room for all of this. That may be true, but it would also become unnecessarily tiring doing all that extra walking. And you would need an awfully big kitchen to start with. Of course, this 6 meters 20 feet is only a guideline. You see, the ergonomic kitchen isn't an absolute. It is a matter of searching out the important information, studying the geography and architecture of the specific kitchen, and establishing the aspects of the kitchen that are important to you, and then designing appropriately to match our expectations. But we needn't stop here. We can discover some other interesting ergonomic principles elsewhere in the home. There are some pretty obvious comparisons between the kitchen and the bathroom. They both have counters, cupboards, and toe space. They both must be hygienic, so they tend to have light-coloured surfaces to expose any dirt, which also makes them easier to clean. And they both have 2 speeds of use, fast and slow. In the mornings we rush our breakfasts and our stay in the bathroom, but there are those occasions where we need the time to prepare that special meal or relax in the bath. In other words, there always has to be a social link that connects ergonomic data with the activities we're engaged in.
But there's one more issue that's particularly critical to the design of bathrooms, and that is safety. There tends to be a lot of water in a bathroom, so accidents do occur, slipping in the bath, for instance. And we don't realise how handicapping some of the products that are designed for bathrooms can sometimes be. For example, wet hands don't grip smooth taps easily, yet they have to be easy to clean. So if we do have smooth taps, they should be very large to give a good contact area, and it should be obvious how we should use them. How many times have we been confronted with an unfamiliar bathroom in, say, a hotel, and gone through the frustration of trying to get a warm jet of water, usually by trial and error, let alone how to convert the taps into a shower? And this embarrassment becomes particularly significant for that large percentage of the population that has to wear glasses. They either get steamed up or we don't wear them, in which case we can't find out how to use the blooming taps in the first place. It's not only frustrating, it's potentially dangerous. It's simply bad design.
Some taps employ levers instead of knobs quite successfully, but the variety of styles can be confusing, and how they are to be used is not always obvious to the first-time user, and some are not easy to clean either. So when we see pictures of great-looking bathrooms in magazines, try to work out just how well they would work. How good are their ergonomics? Some look very unusual and may not perform too well either. Good designers should know how to create both, the useful and the beautiful. Here's another example of where ergonomic concerns aren't as simple as they might seem to be, in the dining room. Here's the problem the designer of a table is faced with. A table should allow enough room in front of and around each person, that's fairly clear, but it should also encourage the right kind of interaction between the people that are sitting at the table. First, there is the angle between people. It can be uncomfortable facing someone unless you're very intimate with them. It also isn't very successful when you're sitting directly alongside someone because you can't see each other's faces at all. The most successful interaction tends to be when people are adjacent or at right angles to each other. But the old dining tables, like in the Waltons, were long and narrow, with the head of the family, usually the male, at one end, and his wife at the other, or sometimes to his side. The children or guests were arranged along the side. There tended to be two types of interactions, one between the children and the other between the father as the head with the rest of the family. This tended to make children heard, but not seen. You can see this in the diagram, that the lines of sight between the children were quite minimal along the sides. For families of 4 or 5 people, a square or rectangular table seems to be fine. But perhaps the most equitable table is a round one, ideal for interaction between everyone, and no one is at the head. But what about the cutlery? Well, one of the best ways of appreciating good design is to have experienced bad. Plastic cutlery is usually a handicap, an imitation, but with no real success. You see, cutlery may look simple, but it too has to satisfy a whole range of special conditions. Cutlery must be non-corrosive and easily cleaned, fit comfortably in the hand, and in the case of spoons and forks, in the mouth. It must be well balanced and useful in several ways. The fork is a wonderful device that was developed long after the knife and the spoon. We use it as a scoop, and we use it more vertically. In both cases, the prongs or tines are critical. When it's a scoop, food mustn't drop through, and when we pierce the food, the tines actually must be sharp enough for the food, but not for our mouths. The food should then stay on the fork. Bad tine design causes the food to crack and break up, and above all, a fork shouldn't bend when pressure is applied. The knife also confronts problems when the material it is usually made from changes. Well-designed metal table knives not only have handles that are comfortable to hold, they are also heavy enough to keep the blade from touching the table, even with a blob of butter on it. But plastic simply isn't as dense as metal, so just copying the shape of the metal knife won't produce a well-designed plastic one. A mere smear of butter could cause the blade to nosedive onto the table. So a plastic knife would have to be designed differently. What all these functional needs lead to is an apparently simple functional piece of cutlery. Material, form and function all appropriately considered. This is an example of good design. You see, well-designed things aren't complicated. They tend to be simple, refined, what we often refer to as elegant. But when we just copy the look but neglect the human needs, our expectations won't necessarily be matched. So we've focused on just two items, the shape of the table and cutlery, are both completely different, but both in their way concerned with making us comfortable while we eat. So let's look at this word comfort, because it too is important to both ergonomics and good design. Now, it wouldn't surprise you if I said this bed was comfortable. We often interchange the word comfort with the word soft. But in a bed, the softness is often there for a reason. Let me explain. The wavy line on this graph represents the depth and shallowness of our sleep. The horizontal line indicates a consciousness level, with time represented from left to right, covering one night's sleep. So, our deepest sleep occurs during approximately the first 45 minutes. From then on, our sleep gets shallower and shallower, and about 8 hours later, we wake up. But notice the frequency of these waves. They occur roughly every hour and correspond with the need for the brain to wake up our body just enough, now and again, to move. Because some part of us is going numb. We've all experienced numbness after a deep sleep, and quite the opposite after a bad night full of tossing and turning. And when we're laying down, we only need to move once an hour. That's because the weight of our bodies is distributed over a large area, so the pressure at any point is low. That means the blood can still circulate. You see, the amount and type of support is a key factor in determining comfort. Oh, now this chair supports me, as does a bed, but in this case, support is firmer. In fact, there are many hard products in addition to chairs that we will say feel comfortable, as long as they allow for repositioning now and then to reduce the chance of numbness. We should also always remember that as we age, our skin doesn't react as well as it does when we are younger. You can test this by pinching your skin and seeing how quickly the blood rushes back to turn the skin back to its usual colour. The older we are, the slower that response becomes. So our skin is less able to allow for blood circulation, and this is a major concern for seating for the elderly. So comfort without numbness is critical. Now, let's look at a few chairs, all with different functions, and see how they offer comfort to the user. This milking stool, this kitchen chair, this office chair, all have hard seats, but all allow for repositioning, a prerequisite for comfortable sitting. This rocking chair is hard, but its action forces a weight shift, which in itself prevents numbness. So it is quite comfortable to sit in for a long time. Padded chairs allow us to sit in them longer, but the activity performed while sitting in a chair is also important. For instance, watching TV means that as long as the eyes can focus squarely on the screen, the body can be in almost any position. In fact, the eyes will force the body to move because they actually don't like staying in a fixed stare from the same position for too long. So good design takes into account the function of the chair, the time spent in it, the required support and comfort, and its context. This is where we came in, looking for clues for how we, the users, affect the design of products. Now, it's clear that the design of all products must respect our physical capabilities and the patterns in which we do things, be it eating, cooking, or working at our computers. We've gone from anthropometrics to ergonomics and through a lot of sub-sciences we didn't mention, all of which are based on data accumulated from our experiences and which must be interpreted appropriately to ensure that the right expectations will be matched for the right clues. Good design matches expectation, minimises embarrassment, and above all, respects our dignity. So a good fashion designer flatters the user. A good graphic designer communicates. A good interior designer creates a functioning environment to live in. A good industrial designer helps me to drill perfect holes. A good furniture designer makes chairs comfortable. And a good architect will design a building that works well for everyone. And all good designers know how to use the right materials, be they fabrics, wood or plastics, which happens to be the topic for the next programme, the materials products are made from and their influence on good design.